Welcome back, everyone. It's World Refugee Day, and the United Nations is calling on countries near Sudan to keep their borders open as the number of people fleeing the conflict continues to surge. Jody Jacobs has more from New York.
There are more than 110 million people displaced because of crises around the world. Conflicts in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria and Ethiopia have all contributed to this number, with the latest outbreak of fighting in Sudan adding even more. The United Nations says the number of people fleeing the conflict now tops 500,000, while 2 million people are internally displaced.
Donc c'est une situation inquiétante parce que
it's a worrying situation because we haven't seen much progress so far, if any, in the negotiations between the two leaders, the two generals, fighting in the country. And we are unfortunately gradually witnessing the destruction of this country.
Grundy says the current situation is unsustainable. A record 25 million people in Sudan, that's more than half of the country's population, now depend on humanitarian aid.
Que beaucoup de ces pays limitrophes sont très fragiles.
Many of these neighboring countries are very fragile, and there is also an element of insecurity that risks spreading as a result of this situation. My appeal to all the neighboring countries is to say, I understand your security concerns, but please keep your borders open, because these people are really fleeing for their lives.
On Monday, the United Nations led an appeal for funding to help the people of Sudan. It raised $1.5 billion, with UN Chief Antonio Guterres warning the country was descending into death and destruction. The world body has appealed to the international community to dig deeper, saying donations were a fraction of defense spending by some rich nations. Jody Jacobs, CGTN, New York.
Well, when we often think of refugees as being a drain on host countries' resources, but forced migrants can also bring economic benefits to where they live. Access to labor markets allows them to be employed, while others may create businesses and hire other people. Ahead of World Refugee Day, more than 40 companies in Europe, including big names such as Amazon, Hilton Hotels, and Starbucks, have pledged to hire thousands of Ukrainians and other refugees for their workforce over the next 3 years. Okay, but let's talk about all the economic contributions as well as the downfalls that come as refugees make their way into other nations. And we're joined by Raymond Terrace. He is a political science professor at Tulane University in the wonderful city of New Orleans. Thanks very much. We appreciate you coming on to chat.
Yes, thank you for having me yet again.
Let's talk about the state of refugee crisis globally. True, there are economic benefits, but so many people focus on the downside as nations come to grips with as we come to grips really with the tragedy that happened just a few days ago off the coast of Greece, where hundreds of migrants are believed dead, including many women and children. That's the story many people think of.
That is terrible, this incredible tragedy. I'm also very concerned that the Greek Red Cross and other coastal vessels are being blamed for the tragedy, whereas the real blame should go to, in large part, the Pakistani smugglers who are responsible for putting all these people on the ship. Unfortunately, it was only men that were able to be saved, and most of the near all the women and the children were in the bottom hold, and so they drowned. But what is really unfair is to blame the Greek Coast Guard for not acting quickly enough.
Yeah, well, there's no shortage of people to point finger at in that one. Let's talk about the red flag areas for you now globally. Obviously, the Sudan is an area, Ukraine continues to be a problem, Syria, and coupled with the earthquakes that hit in parts of Turkey and Syria in the early part of this year, it's just a metaphor for misery right now.
It is, in fact, with every passing year, it seems that the situation of refugees is worse and worse. The ability to make it to Europe, which is the prime goal of maybe up to 100 million Africans. That's one estimate I've received. Is really elusive. A lot of times, it needs a smuggler to get you over to the continent, and I think the other important factor is to be very clear about the distinction between asylum seekers or refugees on the one hand and economic migrants on the other. So I think at the top of the hierarchy would be refugees who fear persecution wherever they are coming from, whereas economic migrants, most of the phrases that are said are we want to have a better life somewhere else. Well, that doesn't really compare to what it is to be an out-and-out refugee. One other comment I would make is displaced people. So especially in the case of Ukraine, there are, literally several million people who have been displaced. That means that they move from one place to another within Ukraine, not trying to seek refugee status in Poland or England or Netherlands and so on. And I think that's that also is very, very, painful and leads to family separation, and the list goes on. All the bad things that happen when people are forced to leave a particular place and move to another within their own country.
Yeah, Raymond, those are important distinctions. I really appreciate bringing those out. But even those who do make it safely to another nation, I've spent a decent amount of time in Afghanistan, and a number of colleagues, people I've known over the years, are now in this area, and in many ways, once they arrive, the struggle is just beginning. What can refugees expect when they do find safety in a new nation?
And that really differs from one country to another. I spent a lot of time focusing on refugee claims in places like Europe, and the fact of the matter, yes, as far as Greece is concerned, is that the amount of refugees admitted when they've already got submitted papers is something like under 1%. So Greece does have this reputation of being rather xenophobic. I don't think that the refugee situation is looking very, very good. If you look at Sweden and Norway, they're just really starting to slam the door shut. Both Sweden and Norway, Sweden and Finland, have right-wing parties now that are opposed to any further type of immigration. And so if you are a refugee, probably the place you would want to go to is Germany, because it's still the best option available to them. But of course, a lot of times we get involved in the race to the bottom, that refugees are arriving and they're getting the worst type of work available. This isn't really kind of secure employment. And this really makes the situation so precarious that they really have trouble settling in any one country.
Yeah. Raymond Terrace, always a pleasure. And it's interesting to see big companies like Amazon, Starbucks, and others reaching out. We'll talk about that next time. Raymond, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Sean.